Good morning. Welcome to this session about empowering wildlife conservation heroes. This is a completely new format that we're trying this year. We know that when you come to Expo, you want to hear from as many conservationists as possible. So we're trying this new lightning round format that will allow you to hear from 4 people within the hour. So in the next hour, you'll hear from Dr. Rachel Graham of MarAlliance, who will tell you about all of the accounting and finance capabilities that she's built on her team. Many of you probably don't know that at WCN, we spend a lot of time investing in the capacity building of our conservationists behind the scenes. On any given day, WCN staff are working really closely with all of our field partners on anything from finance to accounting to grant writing, marketing, communications, strategic planning, and of course, fundraising. So you'll hear from Rachel Graham and her team on her finance and accounting capabilities with the help of WCN staff. You'll hear from Dr. Claudio Solero of Ethiopian Wolf Conservation Program, who's implemented a project management software tool with Wild Team UK that has greatly enhanced the communication capacity of his field team. You'll also hear from Rebecca Klein of Cheetah Conservation Botswana, who received an entire solar power system from a WCN volunteer, which has greatly enhanced the sustainability and efficiency of her field site. Finally, you'll hear from Aristide Kamla of African Marine Mammal Conservation Organization and the recipient of WCN's largest scholarship grant last year, which is enabling him to become the first marine mammal biologist in his home country of Cameroon. We believe that it takes more than just camera traps and good science to save species. You need to have strong leadership skills, strong organizations, and strong teams. We're excited to share these stories with you today. So now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Rachel Graham, founder of MarAlliance, which is dedicated to the conservation of sharks and ray species worldwide. She's the recipient of the prestigious Whitley Gold Award for her work on whale sharks in Mesoamerica. Today she lives in Panama, and she sits on the IUCN Species Specialist Group for Sharks and Rays and the IUCN Specialist Group for Protected Areas. Dr. Rachel Graham.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, good morning. Well, wonderful. I do want to tell you about some of those financial aspects, but I want to tell you about why we're doing all that financial work, and it's really about the creatures, the wildlife that we absolutely love, and they are the sharks and rays. A lot of the time, when we think about sharks, we think about big creatures. Tiger shark, up to 17 feet, incredible predators, omnivorous in the sea, whale sharks that can reach 60 feet, that can filter out the smallest of animals down to less than 1 millimeter in size, and then can travel thousands of kilometers, retaining this memory map of where they need to go to get their next meal. To the Caribbean reef shark, which is very coastally constrained, but one of the most important sharks in the Caribbean basin. To that incredible scalloped hammerhead, which has evolved over millions and millions of years to create this incredible head called a cephalofoil that is so beautifully adapted to catch fish, because this is mainly what they all want to eat. They've learned to swim on their side to save 10% of their energy using that big dorsal fin of theirs. And oh, by the way, I do want to do a little shout out here. For those of you who have maybe never swum with a hammerhead, we actually have a VR, a virtual reality swim dive with hammerheads, thanks to Oceans 360 Steve Mandel and Rick Miskiv, who shot all of this stuff today by the MarAlliance booth. Okay, that was my shout out. But all of these animals have evolved over millions of years to have these incredible skill sets that enable them to be the top of their game in their particular niche and habitat. And these skill sets don't just pop out miraculously. They don't just arise as large sharks immediately. They often start out as these cute, little, kissable, 1-foot animals that are all head and just a little bit of a tail. And they have, unlike us, no parental care. They're often born live, and they have to grow as quickly as possible in order to avoid their predators, find their place in their habitat. And for these young baby sharks, and I'm not going to start singing the baby shark song, don't worry, okay? I'm so done with that. I can hear refrains coming. This is not good. With the hammerheads, they need these shallow coastal areas where the sea is warm, where the food is abundant, but unfortunately where they tend to be quite predictable. And their predictability is unfortunately also their demise, because it is fisheries that are the greatest threat to sharks these days. We have seen over a 90% decline over the last 30 years in especially hammerheads. They eminently get trapped in nets. It's really, really, it's frightening because now they are endangered to extinction. And so we at MarAlliance are focusing a lot of our work now, not just on the adults that need our help, and they too are being fished, as you see from this adult scalloped hammerhead head that was caught by a fisherman in Honduras, but also on these small baby sharks, because it's been determined that saving their nursery sites, which is where they're called pups, and these small sharks, and enabling them to grow to adulthood is one of the best ways of actually securing a future for their populations. And how do we do that? Well, we are transferring our skills, all these capacities that we've built up in science, we're transferring them over to traditional fishers and to local students. And our teams are almost entirely local, because what we want to do is we want to create a love for these animals alive. We want to create empathy. Empathy is a key skill that you may have some of when you're born, but you can certainly augment tremendously. And so, for example, here, I'm actually working with several traditional fishers in Belize, and I'm teaching them how to catch the hammerhead gently, how to measure them, tag them, and they themselves are then transferring those capacities for research and monitoring to other fishers. And all of a sudden, we have this incredible horizontal diffusion between fishers and all these newly acquired skills. And it's not just the research, but it's also, as I mentioned, the empathy, learning that this little shark that you catch today could be an adult that will keep that population thriving for decades to come, because these are very long-lived creatures with gestation periods of often over a year and relatively small litter sizes. So they're very close to us in terms of their life history, which is what makes them so incredibly vulnerable to overexploitation. And it's not just that in-water work, hands-on monitoring, but it's also how are data collected? Why is science important? And what part can the fishers play in that data collection and that science? This is critical, because if they are to take ownership of some of this decision-making that is affecting the fish that they fish, they need to know how science is collected. They need to know how decisions are made. And so transferring these skills and these capacities to traditional fishers enables them to have a seat at the table when it's time to make decisions in marine protected areas and other sites that we're trying to conserve for the future of sharks and rays. And as I said, they then take all of these skills and transfer. Again, we've got Hilmar Salazar here, who is one of our key fishers in Belize, transferring knowledge and data collection over to Henry Mesquita from Mexico. And there's Hilmar again, transferring knowledge about a range of other technologies to a host of other fishers in Mexico. And before you know it, all of these fishers now have new skills that they're parlaying into economic alternatives that are bringing in thousands of dollars for them. And during that time, they're not fishing. So we are reducing fishing effort from some of the best fishers out there while they're working with us in monitoring. And it's not just about, again, the baby sharks, but it's also transferring those skills to yet another cohort of people. And here we've got Evan Cuevas in the blue shirt under the supervisory eye of our technical coordinator, Ivy Barrymore, who worked with NOAA for over 10 years as a shark specialist, works on deep sea sharks especially, and they're teaching Cynthia, our firecracker, amazing education outreach and research intern. We have everybody do many things in our organization. And she's learning how to tag a baby lemon shark so that she, in turn, can spread that knowledge. That's what a baby lemon shark looks like when you're actually releasing it after you've tagged it. And we take every opportunity we can to share that information, to educate. So now here we've got Hilmar again, whom we've taken to Panama. He's now sharing that information on the invasive lionfish, which was our entree to working in communities in Panama because they were worried about the lionfish, and educating the children there. Always fun is a really good part of what we do, and bringing in the crowds and bringing science also to local students. Very, very important. We really like to see an increase in scientific education, all the communities that we're working with. And of course, these have to be experiential, because if you don't have that connection with nature, why are you going to care for it? How are you going to create that empathy? So that's a very big part of what we do, is bringing children to the sea and getting them to know the sharks up front and personal. But back to the small sharks. It's not just them who are learning all these amazing skills in order to thrive and survive. But like Joyce said, I formed MarAlliance just over 4 years ago. I'm a shark biologist. I don't know how to run QuickBooks. IRS, I know I have to file a 1040 because I have a US citizenship, but a 990? 57 pages? Are you kidding me? And what, you want an audit as well? Okay, so these were all new skills that I just had to learn. And thanks to Valita Allen, who is the financial controller for WCN, she came down, she got us ready for these audits. She helped us set up the QuickBook in the way that we needed. And I, in the meantime, through some of the professional development that WCN has provided, have learned leadership skills, have learned managerial skills that help me to better steward my not only my board and build my board, who's incredible. Big shout out to our board of MarAlliance because they have been so supportive for the work that we do, but also enable us to be an effective organization in doing grassroots research and conservation of sharks in multiple locations. We started in Belize, now we're working in Mexico and Guatemala, Honduras, Belize, Panama, Cape Verde, and Micronesia. And we can only do that because we've had all these horizontal transfers of skills, those that I've acquired, those that others have acquired, and we pass them all on amongst one another. Please reach out to my colleague Cynthia Lima, who's at the back of the room today, but she will be at our booth, and she's our education outreach officer in Cape Verde. Talk to her as well. And with all these wonderfully skilled teams and people, we are better able to actually conserve the baby sharks of the world in their nursery areas. Thank you.
Stay. Thanks, Rachel. So we've got time for about 2 questions from the audience, if anyone would like to ask Rachel a question.
Yes, please.
Right here.
How has plastic pollution affected sharks? Actually, it's been a very big worry. We're seeing a drastic increase in plastic pollution across all seas. And what we've seen is the ingestion of plastics to the detriment of sharks. We had a large female Caribbean reef shark in a major tourism area that once we did a necropsy, she seemed perfectly fine. We did the necropsy, her entire spiral valve, which is a modification of the stomach, was entirely filled up with plastic bags. And we found plastic bags in rays. And we found bottle caps and more in mahi-mahi, so what we call dolphin fish, because we also work with fin fish and the recreational fisheries. So it's a huge impact. So if you can reduce your plastic footprint, not use single-use plastic bags and all the rest, we're very thankful for that.
Question in the back.
So recently in California, saw mako shark jerky for sale. How do you respond to that? My response would be, are you entirely sure that you want to sell this? Because there's enough published literature out there that shows that your methylmercury levels in the larger sharks especially, but across many species and across many sizes, is far above acceptable levels. So do you really want to poison your clientele?
Thank you, Rachel.
Welcome.
Thanks. Thank you, Rachel. And please visit her table and consider making a donation to MarAlliance today. Next up, it's my honor to introduce Dr. Claudio Solero, founder of Ethiopian Wolf Conservation Program. Originally from Argentina, today Claudio lives in the UK, where he's a professor at the University of Oxford at the Wild Crew Conservation Research Unit. He's also the winner of a prestigious Whitley Award, and he sits on the IUCN Canid Specialist Group. It's safe to say that without Claudio and the work of his team at EWCP, Ethiopian wolves would not exist today. Dr. Claudio Solero.
Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be back in San Francisco in one of these wonderful expos and meeting some old friends and making new ones. Many of you will be familiar with the Ethiopian wolves. I've been telling you about them all these years, although very few people would actually have seen them in the flesh because they're found only in a few mountain enclaves in the highlands of Ethiopia. Gorgeous-looking creatures, very special in the sense that they have specialized to live in these high plateaus, and that in a way has become a reason for the demise. So they're now constrained to smaller and smaller mountain peaks, and there are only a few hundred of them left. Only a week ago, even less, I was in Chafadalacha. As you could see in the bottom picture there, I'm camping out at 13,000 feet with my team, and we're doing some work testing a canine distemper vaccine. And it was an opportunity to reminisce about the work we've been doing, about 30 years of work with my team, a team that started as a team of 2 and now has more than 70 people, and thinking about how we have built the capacity, our capacity, and that of our team, and how WCN has helped us to do so. Gorgeous creatures that thrive on these apparently barren, but actually very rich landscapes because of the incredible biomass of the small grass rats and giant mole rats that provide their main prey. Although solitary during the day, because they're better off at catching the prey that way, Ethiopian wolves will gather together early in the morning, at noon, and evenings to socialize. And those interactions, close interactions within the family pack, glue and bond these social groups in a way that helps them benefit by patrolling and protecting the home ranges together, and with larger packs being able to secure larger home ranges with greater resources and therefore becoming more successful. They also help the alpha pair, the alpha female, bring up a litter of pups, hopefully once a year. There might be as many as 7 of them. And this is the payoff I get for my work, because I get to see these guys very close up and personal and see the dedication they put in to provide for these pups. Not only they play with them, they guard the den to protect them from other wolves or hyenas or any other threats, but also will bring food initially to the mother and later on to supplement the diet of the little ones, which will hopefully grow into recruiting into the pack. And when those packs grow above a certain number, and we currently have a pack of 19 adults, and we're expecting 6 pups perhaps in the next couple of weeks. So eventually that pack will split into 2 and will help recolonize some of the areas where the wolves are currently not found. How do we know all this? Well, because we are fortunate enough to be able to see it with our own eyes. Many of my colleagues work on species that they don't get to see at all, whereas we just walk out of our camp and sooner or later we will encounter them. Here I am with my good friend Alo Hussein, which is our senior wolf monitor, and he has eagle eyes that will spot wolves where you couldn't believe they're present. So through this basic field methodology, we're able to follow these animals close up and get into every detail of the intimate lives. And that helps us to plan to protect them. Part of our work also reveals that the wolves are not alone there. They share the land with people, with the livestock, and with domestic dogs. And if you look up in the background of that picture, there is a wolf paying close attention to the dog that is having his picture taken here. So these two are living hand in hand, and that brings in a situation where disease becomes a real issue. And I'm sure you have heard me talking about this before, that rabies outbreaks and canine distemper outbreaks present the most acute and present danger to the wolves. But we're able to tackle this, and we have some really good news in recent times. Through our One Health approach, we are able to protect the wolves, but in doing so, we also protect the livestock and the dogs of the communities that live hand in hand with the wolves. We've been for many years vaccinating domestic dogs, and we know that those communities where the dogs are vaccinated not only have a healthier dog population, but also there are fewer people that get attacked by dogs and might eventually develop rabies, which is a ghastly disease, but also financially better. The livestock survives better, and they are about $70 better off per household per year than those communities where the dogs are not vaccinated. People will get a certificate, so we're able to track how those dogs have been covered and protected. And the interesting outcome of these vaccination campaigns is that now increasingly people will come to us and bring the dogs for vaccination, such as these young shepherds there. So there is an awareness of the importance of getting protection. Of course, there is still a lot of work to do, and recently we have had a great success in which we have, after many years of lobbying and arguing with government authorities, to test first and demonstrate the safety of an oral vaccine, which we are now deploying. So we no longer have to respond to emergencies when animals get sick, but now we are able to preempt that by having the dogs vaccinated the way you will have your pets vaccinated. So this is a great success, and we just started a few months ago. And we should be able, every 2 or 3 years, to vaccinate every population in Ethiopia. And it's a lot of fun, because it allows us to be out there and spend time in the field. How do we go about delivering these vaccines? In Europe, we eradicated rabies in France, parts of Germany, and Switzerland by throwing oral vaccine baits out of helicopters. We do it in a more personalized way in Ethiopia by setting up camera traps, and here is the team just testing one of those. And then we just watch as the animals come, find the baits, and eat them up. There's some interesting responses here, because we have some youngsters that like this bait so much that will be back and back over again. So we have to be careful that they don't end up taking too many baits, because there's a lot of work involved in producing them. So once this happens, we have to move our baits away. But it's looking great, and this really offers an incredible tool for us to move forward. And having the wolves there also gives us the opportunity to protect these most wonderful landscapes, which are unique to the highlands of Ethiopia. I like to refer to this as the roof of Africa. There are many other species that also benefit from this protection, in addition to natural resources, such as a water catchment. But the gelada baboons, Rushat's rail, subspecies of black and white colobus monkeys, starky hares, mountain yellows. These are species you will find nowhere else but in the highlands of Ethiopia. And chief among them, my good old friend, and I'm sure you have met him before, the giant mole rat, found only in the Bali Mountains. So they're extremely rare and extremely paranoid, to the point that the eyes have migrated to the top of his skull, so that they don't need to stick their head out too far out of the burrows to avoid being eaten. But it remains the most important and favorite prey for the wolves. Conservation doesn't take place in isolation. So we have to work with people that rely on those resources. And one of the of our most successful programs is our biodiversity-friendly futures. We work with people to try to help them use those resources in a more sustainable way. Here, for instance, a family living in the highlands that will rely on erica, this ericaceous vegetation for firewood, for lighting, for building. And of course, if they were to use these, and there is a little bit of a tragedy of the commons there because land is not owned but shared, we end up having an overuse of resources and serious degradation issues. The communities discuss the use of those resources together, and we help them become a little bit more sustainable. For instance, fuel-saving stoves with women that prepare those stoves and sell them to the community. It's a nice story here at Sahai, a woman that with other 4 friends started making those stoves with the funds that we provide, and she's been able to save some money and become really independent and able to expand her line of business. Honey production also with producers protecting erica moorlands where the bees feed. And this is very particularly interesting, the use of this festuca grass that is important for building materials, which through the growing of wasa gardens, we are able to restore the habitat and also provide a cash crop. We also work patrolling fires and so on, but just trying to get to how we go about enabling a team to acquire the skills so we can do our work better. On this picture, back to 1987, my early graduate years, the chap on the ski jacket next to me, Idris Ebu, age 16. He was starting his work with me. And on the right, a very established program manager that without whom we couldn't exist. So this is organic training, training on the workplace, but incredibly efficient. Training of community guards, for instance, in Borena Saint National Park, this come from the local community, and we give them the tools and the equipment so that they can protect those resources that are so important. So different types of training, but essential for the work we do. And the more formal way, and Joyce mentioned this, was a partnership with a wild team with financial support from WCN that help us get a grasp of project management. And this might sound very tedious, as tedious of your accounting needs, but for us has been an eye-opener. For instance, that you can only have one line manager, simple basic facts that you have to have a clear line of command and responsibilities and so on, using trackers, which are very simple Excel files with multiple access that allows people to keep tabs on where they are with the work programs and so on. There is an element of training, but there is also tests. So we now have a group of team leaders that are able to track the progress and the progress of their colleagues and follow their objectives and make sure that we meet those goals. So this has revolutionized the way we do our work. But equally important has been the support we had from WCN for formal training of our people and semi-formal training. For instance, just as an example, we have Alo Hussein on the top left, Mustafa Dule. They benefited from partnership, partner internships that WCN offers that allows people to go and visit other WCN projects. Musti went to CCF in Namibia, got some training there. Alo has visited his colleagues in Kenya. Some of his Kenyan colleagues from MarAlliance have been over to Ethiopia to learn from our people. So this is an amazing way of sharing knowledge. Many meetings and training in the field. And on the right, on the more academic side, Gebeyo Rizkai, is Gebeyo here? Well, I don't see him, but Gebeyo did his diploma at Oxford University with us, has done his master's in in Ethiopia, thanks to scholarships from WCN. And at the top, Dr. Girma Shete, he recently got his PhD from Leiden University in the Netherlands with a scholarship from WCN. So we're now able to put truly qualified people to do the work that I no longer could do or should be doing. But I feel properly backed up by having these wonderful people behind us. So thank you very much for your support. We couldn't do without you.
Thanks, Claudio. We've got time for 1 or 2 questions for Claudio.
Well, before you ask me a question, let me tell you something else. This wonderful site comes from northern Ethiopia, and the wolves tend to get lost in that wonderful festuca grass that we are working very hard to restore. So our ambitious future plans, now that we think we got a grasp on dealing with disease and health issues, will be to relocate some of these wolves to areas where they have become extinct. So what we call our conservation translocations is a new concept for us. We haven't got any funding for it, but we are working very hard so we can restore some of those places and put these wolves where they once belong.
All right, we've got a question over here.
No. These dogs, will they breed with other dogs, different species? Do they interbreed with those local dogs there?
The question is whether Ethiopian wolves breed with domestic dogs.
Yes.
Yes, that has been known to happen, but it's very restricted to a particular part of the Valley Mountains, and it hasn't occurred in recent times. But yes, about 20 years ago, we did have a few of those hybrids that we were able to capture, spay, and put back in the wild. So they carry on living lives, normal lives, but without contributing genes to the next generation.
All right, we've got another question over here in the corner.
So do the wolves like to hunt in packs, or do they prefer to hunt alone?
That's a very interesting question, because we traditionally, field biology, conservation biologists used to think of pack living as an essential attribute resulting from hunting in packs. So we say, animals live in groups because they have to go and hunt in packs. But for my studies, the Ethiopian wolves offer a very good model, because they say they don't need to hunt in packs, and yet they live in groups. So we need to find another explanation why they like family life so much. That said, and they like to hunt small mammals, if they get a chance to chase a hare, they will do that. And they are a lot better hunting a hare in pairs or threes or fours, because they tend to be faster than them and more agile in turning. So they open up and they comb the habitat, and when a hare sprouts out, another of your mates might catch it. So there is some pack hunting, but it's not essential for them.
All right. Thank you so much, Claudio.
Thank you. Thank you.
So now it's my pleasure to introduce Aristide Kamla, founder of AMCO, African Marine Mammal Conservation Organization. Aristide is a Fulbright scholar and the recipient of WCN's largest scholarship grant last year, which is enabling him to pursue his PhD and become the first marine mammal biologist in his home country of Cameroon. Aristide also serves on the IUCN Species Specialist Group for African manatees and marine turtles. And I believe that Aristide is the future of marine conservation in Africa. Aristide.
Thank you, Jess. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure for me to be in front of this wonderful audience. I've been waiting for this moment for so long to talk to you about a species that you have probably never heard before. It's my favorite wildlife animal, the African manatee. You probably heard about the Florida manatee. Well, the African manatee look pretty much similar to the African manatee look pretty much similar to the Florida manatee. However, they live different reality and challenges that I'm going to unfold here. African manatee are so gentle. They are shy and elusive. They tend to run away from human presence. And this is because they have experienced they have seen human as a negative threat. Fishermen have been hunting them for so long. So they have learned the hard way. And they also live in a habitat that is very cloudy. It's difficult to see them in the wild. So this is my best manatee picture. Well, many people ask me, what is the difference between the Florida manatee and the African manatee? As I said, they look pretty much similar, but I'm going to highlight here two features that distinguish those two separate species. The African manatee is a little bit smaller than the Florida manatee. And this is because the Florida manatee live in an area where there is winter season, the water is very cold. And because the Florida manatee cannot buy a jacket like you, they cannot afford it, so they need to have this extra layer of fat that help them to thermoregulate. The African manatee, however, live in a very tropical area where the water is warm all year long, so they don't need that much, so much layer of fat. The other difference is on the mouth opening orientation. African manatee have a mouth opening orientation more forward, adapted to feed on the surface or above surface vegetation, which is mostly available in their habitat. While the Florida manatee have a mouth opening oriented more downward, adapted for feeding on sea grasses. There are three species of manatee in the world. The West Indian manatee, that comprises two subspecies, the Florida manatee and the Caribbean manatee. You also have the Amazonian manatee, and then the African manatee in the area in green. African manatee live in both marine and fresh water. However, they prefer to spend time in fresh water because they have plenty of food there. The coastal water is very cloudy, so it doesn't allow the production of vegetation. So this African manatee the African manatee use the coastline mostly to travel between different habitats. So you see, this place is not a place that has been worked out by a bulldozer. It's just the manatee feeding ground. African manatee eat a lot. They can eat about 10% of their body weight daily, which is, by the way, very good for the environment because they help recycle the organic matter while fertilizing the water column and increasing the production of phytoplankton and the production of fish, which is good for the community. And by eating also a lot, they are controlling the proliferation of those invasive species like water hyacinth. Well, it seems like African manatee are not just herbivorous. We've been receiving complaints of fishermen throughout the distribution range of the species that manatee are stealing fish from their net and eat them. And other fishermen are claiming that manatee also eat clams. And there's one study that has already started confirming that, but we need more scientific investigation to confirm that manatee have an omnivorous diet. It's very difficult to live a life of a manatee. Imagine yourself being in a situation where there's a creature always chasing after you, trying to kill you just for your meat. That's what the African manatee live on a daily basis. They are hunted mostly for the meat. In fact, when I was doing my master, I interviewed the local fishermen, and 95% of them told me that manatee meat is excellent, so they love manatee meat. And they're hunting manatee with harpoon and fishing net, as you see in the picture. And this happened mostly at night. And the meat is sold in dark market. So it doesn't happen in the open air. What can happen is that the manatee might disappear without anybody knowing. The top picture on the right, you will see white dots. These are float of fishing nets. There are many, many of them, meaning that there are many layers of fishing net that are blocking this corridor of manatee, and it's also the feeding ground of manatee. And this increases the interaction between manatee and the human activity. And what will usually happen here is that either the manatee will get entangled in the fishing net if they are weak like calf, as you see on the background picture, or if the manatee is strong enough, they will destroy the net. And this will cause another issue. The fishermen will try to revenge by killing another manatee to pay off for the destroyed nets. It's a very big issue. After documenting this threat during my master program in Cameroon, I realized that nothing was being done to protect these species. So I decided to create the first non-profit local organization dedicated to manatee conservation and other marine mammals. With my team, we are working with the local community and other stakeholders to put in place conservation strategy and mitigation strategy to give a better future to these animals. One of the activities we are putting in place is raising awareness. We are working with the young generation. You know, they have been taught that manatee is meat, and we are coming with a different message. We want them to perceive manatee as a friend. We want them to develop empathy for this animal, so that when they will become a big adult like their parents who are killing manatee now, they will not do the same thing. And we're using different opportunities to do that. So we're providing environmental education, but we also use a special event in the country. Like here on the picture the picture on the right is the 20th of May, the Independence Day of Cameroon. There is a parade all over the country. So we use that opportunity to pass on conservation message. On the picture, you will see one of our young students in our education program parading with a manatee mascot. And some students are holding also a signboard with a manatee conservation message. People, the audience, the local people are clapping, even the authority. So the message is passing on, and we're happy about that. 3 years ago, these two fishermen came to me and told me, Aristide, you guys take so much care of manatee than human being. I felt a little bit guilty about that because he was right. If you take care only of the animal without caring about the local community, the work will never be efficient. That's why we thought that it was important for us to put in place alternative livelihoods. We have been putting in place activities such as bee farming that will allow fishermen to have other sources of income than fishing. And the less they will put effort in fishing, the safer will be the manatee because it will reduce the accidental catch. Despite all our enthusiasm and all the work we're doing on the field, if we don't have the science, it will not be easy for us to monitor the progress of our work. So we need also science in order to monitor our progress and to know how many manatee are there in the wild. That's why I'm very thankful to WCN's scholarship and other partners like the Fulbright, the University of Florida, and WCN, who gave me the opportunity to enter a PhD program at the University of Florida, which is, by the way, a top university in terms of manatee research. And in this picture, I was working with my supervisor, Dr. Bob Bundy, who was showing me how to handle a manatee safely. And within my PhD program, I'm doing something very cool. Remember I told you it's very difficult to see a manatee, right? And it's also very difficult to count them. But it's easy to see their poop or feces floating on the water. So with that feces, there is DNA in it, and I'm learning how to use that DNA from the feces in order to tell some story about an individual or population from different habitats. How are they related? And this is going to move the science and the conservation forward. What I learned here in the United States is not just for me. Every time I go back to Cameroon, I train my peers, the young enthusiast people from my country who want to do manatee study. I learn them how to do manatee research and manatee conservation. And the idea is that tomorrow we're going to have a big community of local scientists in Cameroon who will take forward the work that I've started. The African manatee distribution range is huge. It's almost the size of the United States coast. And there's only 5, and maybe less than 5 active African manatee researchers on the ground. So we need more of them. So that's why I need to train more people. African manatee needs your help. Right now, I'm only working in one community out of the hundreds of communities that are present in the area where manatee are distributed. So we need to scale up what we have started in Lake Osa. We need to continue educating the younger generation. We need to move the science to know better about these animals so that we can better strategize our conservation actions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Aristide. Does anyone have any questions for Aristide? Right here.
Are there any legal protections for the manatee, or are they just considered another source of fishing
So
food?
that's a very good question. Actually, African manatee are legally protected throughout their distribution range. They are present in 21 countries. However, the problem is the implementation of the law that protects them. The law implementation is very weak. So we in Lake Osa, in Cameroon, where I'm working, we are working with the government in order to enhance the implementation of the law that protects the manatee. Thank you.
All right, we've got a question over here.
Do the African manatees, do they compete with any local species?
Oh, that's a good question as well. No, they're feeding on plants, there's a lot of plants available for them, so they're just having fun with it. And the only competition I may see is with the fishermen, because the fishermen are complaining that manatee is stealing fish from their net. So maybe if it's true, because we still have to confirm it, if it's true, then they are fighting fish resources with the fishermen.
All right, one last question over here.
So you just mentioned that the fishermen are claiming that the manatees are stealing their fish. With your research, with the fecal research, are you able to find DNA from these fish to say yes, they're correct, or no, that the fishermen are not correct?
Excellent question. Yeah, that's something that we will be able to do in the future. For now, my PhD is only focused about using the feces for two things. The first is to determine their diet, their plants' diet, okay? And then the second is to determine their genetic profile and better understand the genetic population structure. But in the future, maybe in the postdoc or for the student who will come after me, that would be a good research question for them.
Great. Thank you, Aristide.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce our last speaker, Rebecca Klein, founder of Cheetah Conservation Program in Botswana. Rebecca grew up all around the world, including the Caribbean, East Africa, and moved to Botswana during a time when there were no formal protections for cheetahs. So in response, she founded Cheetah Conservation Botswana, and as a result has been responsible for a huge reduction in human-carnivore conflict in the Kalahari region. Today she sits on the IUCN Range-Wide Strategy Group for African Wild Dogs and Cheetahs. Rebecca Klein.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you everyone for being here to listen to all the work that we're doing to conserve these incredible species around the world. It's a real honor to be here. And I'm excited to tell you how the capacity building of WCN has literally empowered Cheetah Conservation Botswana to do the work that we do in the Western Kalahari to conserve cheetahs. To begin with, let's see, where did we start? You know, as Joyce, sort of briefly said, I was lucky to grow up in some wild places, and I fell in love with wildernesses at a very young age. I knew I wanted to be a wildlife conservationist from as long as I could remember, and I wanted to save endangered species. I wasn't exactly sure which species it would be, and I thought time will tell. Let's see. And I got the opportunity to work in, there's my starting slide. And well, I got the opportunity to go to Botswana and work in a reserve called Mokolodi Nature Reserve. And Botswana has one of the largest cheetah populations left in the world today. I was really, really excited to go there. I was doing biodiversity surveys in the reserve. I was also running the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. And one of my jobs was looking after these two beautiful cats, Duma and Lutotsi, which I didn't name them, but it means cheetah in Swahili and cheetah in Setswana. I fell in love with them. You know, every day I would go in, they would come up to me, they would be happy to see me because I had food for them. And they would purr, they would look into my eyes, and I got really, really inspired by these cats. And I started to think, well, you know, these are wonderful ambassador cats. How can we start to partner with cheetah groups that are working throughout Botswana to conserve these beautiful animals? And so I looked around to see where those partnerships could possibly be. And I was incredibly surprised to learn that there was nothing going on for cheetah conservation in Botswana. Botswana was in the center of the cheetahs range in southern Africa, and yet we knew very little about how many cheetahs we had, their status and distribution across the country, and the threats to their populations. And I would go in every day and look at them, and they would look into my eyes as if they were saying, you have to do something. So I thought, well, here's my opportunity to make an impact in the world, and I started up a Cheetah Conservation Program in 2003. And cheetahs really do need our help. In 1900, we had about 100,000 cheetahs, and their range has contracted significantly, and their numbers have gone down alarmingly due to habitat loss, declining prey populations, increasing human-wildlife conflict, which is the biggest challenge for cheetahs today, and the illegal trade as well. Declined to that in 2016, you know, we have just less than 7,000 cheetahs. So it's a really concerning decline. Botswana has a huge responsibility to play in this. Between Botswana and Namibia, we have 55% of the world's cheetahs left today. So it really is a core area for cheetahs. It's the heartland for cheetahs in southern Africa. You can see in 1900, their range covered North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, down into India, and due to the threats that I've mentioned, they've now decreased into just these countries in the red areas that we see today. And the role that Botswana can play in cheetah conservation as a whole is something that we take very seriously. Most of the cheetahs in Botswana, we learned, are found in the Kalahari region, the western Kalahari and the southern Kalahari. So we knew that that's where we had to do our work. These are huge, expansive landscapes, incredibly beautiful. We still have free-roaming populations of wildlife, really good cheetah populations, wild dog populations, other carnivores. It really is an incredible area to do conservation. And we feel that cheetahs are fantastic flagship species for this region. They don't do very well in national parks, protected areas, because they're outcompeted by stronger carnivores. Being a wide-ranging, low-density animal, we need to think of large areas of conservation. You know, being at the top of the food chain, if we can conserve enough cheetahs, we know that the habitat and the other animals on which they depend can also be conserved. And if we look at the human footprint index of Africa today, and we can see, you know, the red is where there's a lot of human interactions and things. The green is where there's sort of the least human influenced areas in the landscape. And we can see that this Western Kalahari area of Botswana is one of the most wild natural landscapes in Africa south of the Sahara Desert. But it's all not simple. We do have incredible wild areas, but we also have human communities that are sharing the land with these animals. And human-wildlife conflict is the biggest threat to cheetahs and wild dogs and the other carnivores sharing the land with these communities. And this is the thing that we knew we had to target early on. We had to reduce the retaliatory killings, because farmers would often see cheetahs, the fastest land animal on earth, as nothing more than a threat to their livestock. And when they'd see them, they would run them down with dogs, they would trap them, they would shoot them. This is what we had to change right away. So we knew we had to work in the Western Kalahari. This is our focal area. And we were invited to set up a camp in a sustainably run cattle farm in the Khensi region. And they were doing all kinds of sustainable techniques. They heard about the work that we were doing with farming communities, and they invited us to set up a camp. Now, it's a really tough area. This is our camp. It's a very rustic kind of bush camp in the middle of nowhere. And just to show you a little example of the expansiveness of where we live, here's a small video which kind of demonstrates that. This is our team, this is our camp, and we're really out there in the middle of nowhere. And you can see that there's no power lines to connect to. Like, how are we going to have an effective camp here? You know, in the summertime, it can get extremely hot. In the wintertime, at night, extremely cold. You know, we needed simple things so that our staff could actually live in these areas. We needed power so that we could run our computers, so that we could have lighting, so that we could have a fridge to keep the food cool. We needed power so that we could have a fan to keep us cool when we were trying to do work. There's a small education center there. We wanted to invite farmers to learn about sustainable farming. We wanted to invite the kids there to learn about conservation. We needed power to do all of that. And we were put in touch with this fantastic man called Steve Gold, who was instrumental in giving us our solar system. At one of my first ever presentation at WCN, which I believe was 15 years ago, I stood up. This was before we had a camp in the Kalahari. And at the end, Steve Gold stood up and he said, "What do you need, Rebecca?" And I was like, "Well, we need this equipment and we need, funding for this and that. And, there's so much to do. I could work 24/7 and we need energy." And I was talking about personal energy to get through the day and do as much work as we can. And Steve thought I was talking about power energy. And he was like, "Right, I'm going to start this solar program. I'm going to enable these conservationists to live in these remote areas by starting up and facilitating getting donations of solar equipment." And so Steve, for the last 15 years, with his right-hand man, Peter, and Brandon, I just think you should stand up so we can all give you a round of applause.
Eating it up.
And that was the best misunderstanding that I ever had in my whole life, because he's gone on to provide solar power systems for over 50 projects around the world. So it's an incredible achievement. And actually, this system is now 10 years old, and technology has advanced significantly. The panels are not really providing our energy needs anymore. And Steve came out, he had a look at everything. He said, "You need a new system." So he came back to California, and he got support and donations. A big thank you to Catherine from Simplify Batteries, Brandon from Outback Power Systems, and Greg from Unirac. They have provided all of the components and provided a system that's worth over $120,000. And on Friday, it left in the container to Botswana. It's going to provide our power systems for the next 20 years. So you're amazing, Steve! And because we live there, because we're able to live there now comfortably and our team can be there, we're able to run our programs. We do scientific research. We count cheetahs through track surveys, through camera traps. We learn more about their behaviors and their land use needs, their spatial needs through satellite collars. All of this takes power. We need to charge our batteries. We need to have computers to download the locations so we know where the cheetahs are. And we receive a lot of information about cheetah behaviors that we can give back to the farmers. Only 6% of their diet is actually made up of livestock. They have really large home ranges. So if you do really good livestock management and protect your livestock, cheetahs will just move through your land and they'll move elsewhere. And it's been really, really effective to get this research done on the farmlands. And so we have a rapid response team because we're living right there, and people can phone us if they're having a cheetah problem, and we can go out and support them and help them to figure out how they can reduce their losses through using herding, enclosure designs, the use of livestock guarding dogs and donkeys and breeding seasons, all proven to reduce conflict. We have mobile workshops where we go out to the settlements. And we also bring the farmers to our education center to learn all of these different techniques. We are able to demonstrate. We have sustainable grazing going on in the land. We have breeding seasons going on, livestock guarding dogs, donkeys, etc. We can demonstrate all of these techniques. We also have our livestock guarding dog program running from this area. We take unwanted puppies from villages, unwanted puppies from animal shelters that are due to be euthanized, and we give them a second chance at life as wildlife conservationists. They come to our farm, they learn from our livestock guarding dogs how to be effective livestock guardians, and then we place them out with farmers such as Mr. Taoshi here, who used to kill cheetahs and jackals that would predate on his livestock. He still had problems, so he called us and we gave him a livestock guarding dog. His losses have reduced to 0, and he's now promoting the concept to his farming community. We also bring the kids to the education center so that we can give them increased knowledge in the incredible wildlife that they live together with. People won't realize that Botswana has so many endangered species, and they need to really have a global view of what an incredible biodiversity Botswana has. So we get them excited about conservation so that they can be the next wildlife conservationists. And we have a new program now that we've started in this, what we call the Wildlife Management Area, and it's a corridor between the Central Kalahari Game Reserve and the Kalahari Transfrontier Park. And this wildlife management area exists. People are supposed to have wildlife-based economies, but at the moment there's nothing but livestock farming going on. And slowly, due to pressure from agricultural needs, they're slowly eroding this wildlife management area at the edges to turn it into more grazing land. So they need to start generating money from wildlife initiatives. So we've started working with these 2 villages, Bere and Kakai. We started off doing participatory planning workshops last year to ask them, where have they come from, where are they now, where are they going, what are their skills and expertise, what natural resources do they have, and what is their vision for the future? So we can start working together to develop some alternative livelihood strategies beyond livestock farming. And just a brief another another capacity building initiative that WCN has supported us with is putting us in touch with an organization called Conservation Strategy Fund. And they're economists. They use economics to promote conservation. And they're going to come out next year, if all goes to plan, and help us to do a livelihood assessment and see which of these potential livelihood strategies are most economically viable. We want to make sure that this young man living in the Kalahari, growing up today, has livelihood options, and that he sees a value in living with cheetahs and other large carnivores in this incredible landscape. If he wants to be a livestock farmer, he's going to know how to do it as sustainably as possible. If he wants to harvest traditionally the teas, the medicinal herbs, the honey that the Bushmen have collected for many hundreds of years and develop those into products, we can help facilitate that process. And if he wants to look into cultural and ecotourism initiatives, they will be there, and they will be creating a value for the wildlife to these people with which they share the land. So I just want to finish off by saying a huge thank you to the Solar Project, to all of you, our wonderful supporters, and encourage you to continue supporting us. It is a collaborative effort. We need all of your support to make sure that we can do the work that we do in the Kalahari and the other great projects we've heard about today. And a huge thank you to WCN for these fantastic capacity building initiatives.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now, if you're willing to hang on for 2 more minutes, we'll take 1 or 2 questions for Rebecca about her project. Is there any questions? Okay, well, Rebecca will be at her... we've got 1 question here.
Are you using drone technology at all to help with the program?
Are we using drone technology to help with the program? Not really in a big way, to be honest. That was a piece of drone footage that a friend of ours who who has one, just did a short little piece for us. But yeah, we haven't sort of really looked into the opportunities of that yet, but we're also always open to suggestions. Well, yeah, I think...
we've got one question over here.
I have a question here.
Hello.
I was wondering if the demilitarization of the poaching patrols in Botswana. I was wondering about the demilitarization of the poaching patrols in Botswana have affected your work. I know certainly there's been a lot of recent reporting on elephants in Botswana, and just curious about what the new government, how the new government might be affecting your work.
Let me take a deep breath. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot in the media recently about this. It's actually a really, really long story, and I know we're up with time, so I'm more than happy to talk about it more. But just briefly, our anti-poaching patrols in Botswana are still armed. The Botswana Defence Force carries automatic weapons. The Department of Wildlife carries rifles. The media took hold of some of the facts and really developed their own story from that. And so it really sounded like all of our anti-poaching patrols were disarmed by the new president, and that is not exactly how it happened. They're still alive and well, they still have arms, and they're still protecting Botswana's borders. And the Botswana government is absolutely 100% committed to wildlife conservation. And actually, the new president has actually sat down with communities and talked to them about their ideas about wildlife conservation. He sat down with the researchers, he sat down with the conservation groups and asked us, what do we think about the future and what are our ideas and information, and asked us to be partners with him in developing a future for Botswana's wildlife conservation. So we're really actually encouraged by that. And I think, beyond what the media is saying and the politics of it all, Botswana remains totally committed to conservation.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you all for coming.